Thank you for coming along. Welcome to the National Library of Scotland. My name is Cheryle Brown, and I will be giving your talk tonight, hopefully, God willing. It's a shame we can't all physically be together in a space, but I hope you'll still get just as much out of it. I'll be having a great time just here, listening to the sound of my own voice. There's nothing I love more. Also, as you've seen, we've got Kenny Redpath, the library's events officer, and we've got Liz and Mike and various other people trying to help us dinosaurs on tech in the background. So we should be able to facilitate a Q&A at the end. So if you do have any questions, just pop them in the chat as we go along. So a little bit about me. I'm a mixture of a multitude of things, some of them quite contradictory, but I'm here with you tonight in my capacity as a writer and a mental health awareness advocate. Most recently, I wrote some contributions for a book entitled The Silent Scream. Its tagline was An Anthology of Despair, Struggle and Hope. It's a collection of shared stories in various forms, from memoirs through to poems, artworks, photographs and the like. Covers a range of topics, but the general theme that knits it together is mental health and related issues and coping mechanisms that come along with. It was a not-for-profit venture. All of us collaborators, we gave our contributions as we believed in the ethos behind the project, which was to break the silence and challenge the stigma around talking about mental health. The architect and instigator behind the whole project was a wonderful lady called Maria Alfuria. Maria's mission in creating the book was to create something that would offer a hand in dark moments, something which would pull people out of isolation and give them the message, you're not alone and there is hope. We shared our stories because we've experienced the other side of struggle and we felt privileged and grateful to come through it. So it's kind of our heart's work to reach out and try and pull people who are still possibly clinging onto the side of those mountains that we'd surmounted. All the profits of the book go to a charity, a mental health charity called Heads On, which I believe is based in Sussex. Maria will correct me if I'm wrong. In the process of collaborating on The Silent Scream, I was inspired myself to create my own year-long living fundraiser in 2019, which I christened the Year of No Fear. I spent the whole year challenging myself to live more authentically and to consider how fear of judgment from other people was holding me back from doing things in my life. I'll talk more in detail about the Year of No Fear and The Silent Scream as we go on. But first of all, I want to say a little bit about why I'm doing this event on this day specifically and why it's so important that we create a space where we can share our stories without shame or stigma. I'll follow up with some insights on the subject of talking and advice, and I want to end with a passage from one of my contributions to The Silent Scream, which really sums up the message which I hope to land in your hearts this evening. I also want to issue a brief content warning as well, as my story contains references to suicide, which I'm acutely aware might be triggering for some people if you're not forewarned. Hopefully this talk will also be shared on the library's YouTube page, and I will aim to signpost some resources and things in the comments that you can use. Before I launch into too much detail, just a little exercise to get us a bit more relaxed, which is especially necessary after the beginning, and just get us thinking about that feeling of relaxation, openness, freedom and relief. I'd just like to invite everyone to take just a few deep breaths. Roll your shoulders if necessary. I always carry a lot of tension in there. Just relax and think about a time when you yourself has felt really relieved to hear someone say something, or you've been really relieved to tell someone something. Just think about that for a moment and really feel it in your body and hold on to that feeling for the duration of the talk. Now I'm going to try and share my presentation with you, so bear with me. As I said, I'm a dinosaur. I do not have the capacity to do that, as Liz will have to enable that. Liz, if you could enable me to screen share, that would be fantastic. In the meantime, I'll carry on. Time to talk day today, ironically. This is the day that the organisation Time for Change has set out to get the nation talking about mental health. Open conversations about mental health are really necessary to make people feel safe to share their own struggles, and they're more important than ever in times like this. The pandemic and ensuing restrictions of the last year, 18 months, have been adding an extra layer of physical isolation to the feelings of isolation people have when they feel they can't share their struggles. Talking openly about mental health and related issues is vital if we're to tackle the stigma which so many people still fear and the shame that people report when they open up about their struggles. Even although there's been a lot of advancement in recent years in terms of legislation even, and equality, discrimination, all that sort of thing, stigma around mental illness hasn't gone away. Many people still report facing judgment and shaming when they recount that they're having mental health struggles or issues. There seems to be the prevalent misconception that mental health is something detached from your general health. It's something in your head, controllable or more manageable than a physical malady, which is simply not true. Around 30 to 40 people reported experiencing shame or discrimination as a result of relaying their issues and struggles with mental health, either to friends and family or more prevalently in the workplace. This taboo and shame keeps people locked in silence and isolation. However, the problems are astonishingly common. Depression is one of the leading causes of disability. It affects 264 million people. And I am going to again try and share my screen with you, so bear with me. I did say a bit of a dinosaur, apologies, and I may disappear again, apologies. But it's the only way I can work out how to do it. Okay, so depression affects 264 million people. 1 in 4 people will suffer some kind of mental health issue in their lifetime. Around 40% of people experience shaming or discrimination. And shockingly, according to the World Health Organization, 800,000 people die by suicide each year. So that equates to 1 death by suicide every 40 seconds. And I worked out that that's 67 deaths approximately during the duration of this talk, which is harrowing when you think of it in that context. It's a lot of people and a lot of families and friends affected also. It's particularly obvious that feeling unable to talk and share your struggles is a huge contributing factor in these suicide figures when we look at the statistics for male suicide. Men are 3 times as likely as women to die from suicide. There still seems to be this expected strong silent type display, which is part of the prevalent toxic masculine archetype. It makes it much less likely that men will share their personal struggles or emotional pain with anyone, so they often don't receive the support they need. Add to this, we live in a world where it's very easy to hide. This is the age of social media. We can edit our lives, and our profile often just becomes a highlights reel of what we want people to see. And often some people are not necessarily responsible in their social media output. We put on masks, we present our best selves for fear of judgment and reproach. All this encouraged by a barrage of quotations set over pictures of mountains or lakes with, slogans like "Think positive" or "Smiling uses 400 billion muscles." I'm not mocking that because I'm probably one of the worst offenders when it comes to sharing inspirational quotes on social media. But it does sort of betray a trend of false positivity, which is encouraging us to dismiss the negative sort of feelings, emotions, experiences as bad or wrong, and then they get pushed back into the shadows again and not spoken about. How we tackle it is by bringing it into the light, talking about it without judging people's feelings as good or bad, or invalidating people's struggles because we expect them to just push through and put your positivity pants on. It's dangerous for so many reasons, not least to paraphrase Maria from her introduction to the Silent Scream. If we cannot tell our story, our story begins to tell us. Repressing these feelings and emotions causes people to develop unhealthy coping mechanisms and even sometimes physiological symptoms. We can take small steps to change in this world, starting with our own attitude, owning our own stories, all parts of them, taking down our masks. This all allows people to feel safe to do the same. It does require a great deal of vulnerability and somewhat bravery, no doubt. I know that personally, but I also know the many benefits that come from the other side, which is why I'm so passionate about sharing my own experiences with others and my story, because I feel if it resonates with just one person, if it helps somebody out there, then it's definitely worth it. So what of my story? What am I rattling on about, I hear you say? Well, there's nothing particularly remarkable about me or my story. I just know personally how difficult it is to speak up when you experience difficulties. I've also experienced a huge internal shift as a result of stepping out of fear and taking the metaphorical mask down. Important, I think, to give some background and context to tell you how I got here and how this all came to a head, I think. So despite appearances and initial jokes, it's actually extremely difficult for me to talk. Always been an anxiety sufferer. I'm quiet, I'm an introvert by nature, and that's exacerbated by quite a high level of generalized anxiety about anything and everything. I still marvel at the creativity I can display in situations where my anxious nature is heightened by either lack of sleep, stress, or just not fully taking care of myself as I know I should. As a result of anxiety and fear, I've lived with a very play it safe mentality. Vulnerability was something that definitely didn't feel safe for me, and I've spent a lot of time in hiding and avoidance, just trying to fly under the radar and not attract any judgment or negative attention. If I did attract that, I had an ignore it and walk away policy. I tried to keep quiet, stay small, avoid any sort of confrontation or anything like that. Outwardly, it might not always have actually been that obvious to other people, and never is that more evident than in this photograph. Back in 2017, to look at that photograph, you would think I was quite literally jumping for joy, but nothing could be further from the truth. This was actually one of the worst times in my life to date. I was miserable, trapped, and about to become completely engulfed in a severe depressive episode. I still find it quite difficult to look at this picture now because I remember that day so vividly, and I remember going home and just sobbing out everything that I had been holding in, which was a regular occurrence at the time. So from the baseline of quiet anxiety and the tactic of avoid, ignore, repress, which was already quite a toxic combination, the few years directly preceding this picture being taken had been a whirlwind of traumatic events and changes compacted into quite a short timeline. In the space of a few years, I had watched my baby son develop a rare and dangerous strain of pneumonia. This landed as a long stay in hospital and many subsequent visits for follow-up and procedures. I also had to deal with the breakdown of my 15-year relationship and navigating all the new territory that came with that, single parenting, solo childcare, working, and financial fears. Added to this, when my littlest child was 3 months old, I experienced the sudden and very unexpected death through suicide of a close family member. It was an extreme type of shock and grief, I can tell you. Spent a lot of time going through what signs I missed, what I could have done, what I should have done, reading old messages, all of those things. But instead of really processing the feeling element that went with that, I put my energy into fundraising and also researching the topic of suicide, from the medical to the metaphysical explanations. And soon afterwards, a friend began to experience a lengthy depression and suicidal thoughts. I hoped to help her by listening and supporting her through it with my newfound knowledge and experience, but unfortunately, she lost her battle and we also lost her to suicide. The guilt I felt for not being able to help her was unbearable, especially so as I'd been due to see her just days before and she'd cancelled because she wasn't feeling up to it. As you can imagine, I did a fantastic job torturing myself over what if I'd done this, what if I'd done that. I didn't talk about it though. I still kept my very keep it all in attitude, as was always. And everything sat kind of unprocessed in this reservoir of feeling, avoided and compacted down behind my I'm fine facade. Everything came to a head just before this photograph was taken. It was the end of a relatively short but intense, emotionally abusive relationship. And that was the drop in the tank that caused complete overflow. I was distraught as all the stuffed away feelings just completely overwhelmed me. The dam was well and truly broken, and I was, as I say, about to be engulfed in complete depression. If we want to be dramatic, and everyone always knows I do, it was my own dark night of the soul experience. It's when I realised the tactic of shove it down and slap a smile on just wasn't going to cut it anymore. So I began to open up, first of all, just to myself through journaling. I acknowledged my own feelings and experiences without judging them through the lens of right or wrong. I joined some online support groups relating to everything I had been through, where I felt safe to share with people and similar experiences. I started my own blog and to a small community of followers and friends, and I found that writing, reading, sharing with other people with similar experiences, it was all extremely cathartic and healing. Being vulnerable and afraid was much more enriching, and the benefits of being open and sharing and creating a safe space for others to talk as well were really highlighted to me through this time as I healed from this depression. It was around then that I came across the opportunity to contribute to the Silent Scream, which I referred to earlier. Maria had put a call out on social media looking for submissions, and the way that she described her mission, the way she told her story, everything about it just absolutely, I thought, resonated with what I was moving towards, and I thought I should see if I could contribute. I noticed immediately some old stories and fears resurfaced about opening up so publicly. It's obviously the exact opposite of hiding. It's very much out there, now published on bookshelves, so all my experiences and thoughts and feelings are there for anyone to see. The first question I decided to ask Maria about contributing in a spectacular missing of my own point was, can I contribute anonymously? And that's fantastic. That just hearing myself asking that question got me to thinking. And I started to ask myself all the questions around how fear of judgment was still holding me back and causing me to hide parts of myself on a really deep level. It just didn't fit in with the open and authentic and at peace person I wanted to be. And this was, making a decision to be more open, to be more authentic. It is, it's a dance, not a light switch. You don't just flip a switch and then that's you. More open and comfortable with it. It was something that was a long journey for me throughout the process of writing the book and doing the subsequent publicity and research. Even when it came down to getting our photographs taken to accompany our entries into the book, I kind of spectacularly missed the point again there. Just definitely didn't nail the brief of not hiding. Might have taken down my mask, but now I'm physically hiding behind my hair. That one didn't make it into the book, but it always makes me laugh because of that. I decided through the process of doing my submissions and finally deciding to do them under my own name with my face visible, that I wanted to live my very own year of no fear. It was around New Year's time at this moment in a resolution making. The initial concept was going to be exploring fear, vulnerability, and my boundaries. I was going to continue blogging and documenting the experiences I went along for other people to share, but it really was initially intended to be a personal growth project. Day-to-day questioning of my comfort zone and what stories have I told myself about what I can and can't do. In the end, I set a series of 12 monthly challenges just for additional focal points to write about. And I did many more sidebar ones as I went along. The funds mostly went to the mental health charity Mind, but also some of the extra challenges that I put in raised funds for the Stillbirth and Neonatal Death Society and Cancer Research UK, among others. So I spent the whole year learning things I had just not expected, attracting opportunities I hadn't expected to attract, meeting people and having new experience. It was just fantastic and completely changed my life. Although at times during I did say that I felt it was getting out of hand. And at one point I even considered renaming it the Year of Perpetual Terror. But I did think it was less catchy. I won't go into a huge amount of detail about the individual elements of the project because I've spoken about them before on a few times. I have the accompanying blog up, and I also am currently working on a manuscript for the book about the year with a working title, A Life Less Fearful. I really am this time, if my publisher is watching. Yes, the draft initially was meant to be finished in 2020, but pandemic and all the rest of that, the fatigue just meant nanny. But I am christening this year, Get It Done 2021, because I love a rhyme. So it is impending, it's happening. I'll talk about my best and worst experiences or challenges, sort of highlights and lowlights. And you can see on the slide here just some of the challenges that I did. So doing a muddy assault course, taking a flight. I'm a terrible, terrible flyer and I hadn't flown for 10 years. So obviously this went very smoothly and I was stuck on the tarmac for 2.5 hours while we waited for takeoff because of a technical fault, which is what every nervous flyer wants to hear. And then we have the Scott Monument, which you can see my love of drama coming out in this one. I've taken it from the most imposing angle, so it looks even more scary. I had attempted to do that once before the Year of No Fear and got halfway up and had to be helped down by tourists. So I felt this was the year to try it again. And I made it to the top. And then we have a Firewalk, which I was surprisingly enjoyed and ended up doing 4 times over. Fear of fire and the danger of fire was one of the things that I used when I was initially talking about the Year of No Fear as an example of when it is sensible to be scared. So you don't want to put your hand in the fire because you're going to get burnt and it's dangerous. And then funnily enough, by the end of the year, I'm doing almost exactly that, walking on fire. As I say, the project changed my life completely, but again, it might not be so visible externally to other people. Definitely on the inside and to how I felt. One major noticeable difference, however, came from my top highlight, which was burlesque class. Welcome to burlesque. So previously, I would have been the last person you would get up on the dance floor. I was shy, scared of people watching and judging me. And really, unless I'd had a few drinks, I would have been sitting at the side watching, not wanting to participate because I'm not really, even now, the best dancer. I seem to have a unique ability to move all of my limbs in different directions simultaneously. I don't have coordination. But to challenge that, I decided I'd like to try a dance class. I specifically settled on burlesque, as obviously seems like a challenging genre, because you might feel like a bit of a fool. And I'd always really liked that aesthetic and the glamour. I say now, if you don't feel like a fool when you're doing burlesque, then you're doing it wrong. It's all about exaggeration and that kind of expression, but it's a lot of fun. So it definitely seemed like the most removed from my personality. And I thought my initial idea was I'm going to attend a class and I'll brave it up. I will move from the person hiding at the back with my hood up to the person at the front, and I'll feel confident and I'll keep it up, and that will be that. I very quickly fell in love with it and I committed to taking part in the school's showcase, which naively I had imagined would take place in a pub or a miners club or somewhere small, and it would be friends and family, intimate gathering, and it would just be a bit of fun for confidence building for me. I hadn't really properly thought it through or researched it, and the week that was due to perform, we got this picture of a point of view picture from the stage of where I was going to be performing. And as you can see, that is a 250-seater theatre. And this little wooden section here at the bottom was also taken up with seating as well, let me tell you. So I always say that it was early on in the year, but it was a point where I kind of blew a fear fuse. I really seen that picture and I was committed. I had a partner act, so I didn't want to let my partner down or the school down or myself. And I wanted to do it, but I really did think, Jesus, take the wheel. What am I playing at when I saw that? But I did it. And again, loved it. Loved the backstage atmosphere, the outfits, seeing other people performing myself. I really, really enjoyed it. And what started as a small step for me and just taking a class that I'd always held back from has opened me up to a whole new world of confidence, women's empowerment, friendship, much, much more. I have gone from hiding at the back of the class because actually now I take it. I qualified as an instructor. It's a picture on what's my right-hand side. My happy face passing my instructor exam. And then you'll see on the other side, you can't read my shiny lanyard, but that is a performer's pass for the Edinburgh Fringe. And by the August time, I was performing in the Fringe multiple times. To present day time, I'm still an instructor, still a performer, performed many times, and I'm about to start delivering my own introduction to performance workshop. So, as I said, my absolute highlight, I cannot imagine my life before it now. It's an absolutely integral part of me as a person. In stark contrast to the love and passion I feel for burlesque, and I'm giggling because I know people who've heard me speak before and all my friends know exactly what's coming next. My mid-year challenge was to climb Ben Nevis. And oh my woolly word, I've renamed it Ben Never Again. I don't even want to put a picture of it up there because I don't want to look at it ever again. I hated every single sweaty second of it. Probably a lot of that was my own fault. I went into it woefully underprepared and armed solely with overconfidence. It was a 10-hour trek up and back down again. And I would love to tell you, because Scotland is beautiful, I used to work for the tourist board and I love it. I'd love to tell you it was worth it, but it wasn't. It really wasn't. This is the view from the top. Fantastic. In fact, that is the view that I had for approximately the last 3 hours of the climb. What we call in Scotland dreich, fog, horrible weather and rain. And this photograph is a perfect example of how social media doesn't in any way reflect reality. This could be the single time that I smiled in that whole trip. The rest of the time it was death stares, especially when we were on our way up, all those blessed people coming down who kept on saying, just a bit to go, not long now. And that seemed to go on for the last 5 hours. And it infuriated me, I can tell you. Way back down, I was slightly more mellow, and it did allow me some time to formulate what was becoming its own sort of mini guide that I said I was going to write. Mountain climbing for absolute idiot beginners. With my love of sharing, I wanted to give a guide full of handy advice. I'll share some of the tidbits with you now, just in case you're interested. First and foremost, the most important thing is to start with the biggest and most challenging mountain in the UK. Don't work up to it in any way, shape or form. If you're not in the UK, find your own biggest and worst. Hand in hand with that goes do very little in the way of training. Possibly watch a couple of YouTube videos and think to yourself, yeah, I could do that. Or even do something completely not comparable in any way, like a walk in the Pentlands. One really good one is to only prepare for the actual event itself, and adds an extra layer of idiocy if you're really, really smug about the fact that you've prepared for the event, because you look super stupid when you get to the bottom and realise you haven't got a towel to have a shower, and you don't have clean socks or clean shoes for the 3-hour car journey home. Something to help you along and to help your friends would be complain as much as possible throughout the whole thing. I'm sure my friend enjoyed that, and it definitely helped me also. As evidenced by the picture, it's great to pick the day with the best possible views to maximise the benefits of having done it. And the most important thing is that you congratulate yourself and buy yourself a medal at the visitor centre when you are done, for sure. It's the first thing I did the next morning. Having said all of that about my fairly physically high low light of the Year of No Fear, for reasons which still aren't 100% clear, I've actually signed up to trek Mount Kilimanjaro in 2023. So there we go. It just proves that I don't learn very quickly or very well. However, I am doing it with the person who I climbed Ben Nevis with, so I feel like that says a lot about her life choices also. Don't know what you're getting out of that, Elizabeth. So these are my sort of highlight activities and things that I learned through the year. I also did a lot of writing and research over the course of it, as well as the writing and research I'd done to present my contributions to the silent screen as sensitively and informed as possible. The biggest thing that I wanted to share when it came out of it was just the feeling of liberation and freedom that came with stopping thinking about what other people were, what their judgments were on what I was doing, what they were saying about me. Yeah, it was the feeling of just kind of not holding myself back and rewriting my own story. That relief that we spoke of earlier, that feeling of just kind of a lifting. So on to my talking tips that I picked up. I'm not an expert, and I will try and signpost some resources and help in the comments, but I have read and written an awful lot across my time. So let's get talking. First and foremost, check in regularly. Don't assume, as I say, because you see in someone's social media feed that they look happy outwardly, that that's necessarily the case, and they don't need you to reach out. And check in on your friends, especially if you've not heard from them for a little while. Go beyond the I'm okay. So it's a natural kind of reflexive action to say when somebody asks you, how are you? Oh, I'm okay, I'm fine. Oh yeah. And then the conversation just moves on. It just flows because people think it's just a politeness, or it's, you know, somebody just asking for the sake of it. Don't accept the initial I'm okay and I'm fine, especially if you don't think that's the case. You can follow up with further questions. Are you sure? You know, oh, it's been a really difficult time. Oh, I heard about this. How do you feel about that? You know, don't be afraid to ask. You don't want to push someone and force them into a corner, but it's a way of letting them know that the door is open. When you're struggling, when you feel that you are keeping in a lot, you often worry about burdening someone else or other people with it. So giving someone a sort of an opening to say, well, actually, no, I'm feeling a bit, you're right, I'm feeling a bit rubbish, is really good. It's sometimes needed. Practice often, because it's difficult. It's difficult to do what I just said above, and it's difficult to talk about mental health. It's where do you kind of fit certain things into the conversation? You can't sort of sit at the dinner table and say, oh, are you depressed? Can you pass the salt? Like, it takes a lot of practice, of learning, of getting to a state where it feels more natural to have these conversations, not forced. And it becomes just easier and easier and part of your routine in your circle. When somebody does open up to you, it's always good to try and just listen and don't fix. It's another innate human sort of instinct to jump in, especially when it's someone we care about, and start offering solutions or trying to fix the problem, as it were. Sometimes people just need to be heard. They just need to say what they want to say and hear sort of empathetic things that validate what they're saying. Like, I'm sorry that happened to you, that sounds really stressful, or that sounds awful, that's, you know, I'm here if you need anything, is there anything you need me to do? Just giving them that opening and feeling, you know, validated, and that they have somewhere that they can share. Try not to accidentally invalidate people with offering them solutions and with comparing the situation to other people's or things that you've experienced. It's all relative, so that everybody's experiences are their own. And, you know, if somebody drowns in 6 inches of water, they're just as dead as someone who has drowned in 6 foot of water. It's everybody's struggles are their own, and people will have different capacities at different times to be able to manage them on their own. So be kind and empathetic with that. Be kind to yourself as well. The big things, think about mental health as part of your general health. So you wouldn't break your leg and then feel ashamed of you needing to heal your leg. You wouldn't expect it to run or perform at full function. You wouldn't get angry with it and, you know, berate it. Oh, you stupid leg, you're broken, you know. You wouldn't expect it to heal in exactly the same timeline, in exactly the same way as any other. You would take the necessary steps to heal if it was physical malady, and that should apply as well to mental health. Get support if you're supporting someone. Don't forget about yourself. It can be a lot to take on your own. So don't be afraid to reach out to services or other people to help support you and help you stay healthy as well. The biggest one for me, which I learned personally through the Year of No Fear project, was say it for you. So sometimes you just need to say something, not because of how someone will respond to it, but because you need to say it. A lot of people are probably sitting at home saying, obviously, of course, but for me it was a mind-blowing revelation. It actually came, I think, out of a talking therapy session I had over the course of that year. I was speaking about a disagreement I'd had with someone and how there was no point in trying to change the other person's mind. They were set in their ways, etc., etc. And the therapist just said, well, say it because you need to say it. You need to be heard, you need it to be out there. Although it might not have any effect on the other person at all, say it for you. It was then that sort of years of swallowing my words and avoiding confrontation and difficult conversations on the proviso that it just wasn't worth it, wasn't worth the energy, kind of clicked for me all of a sudden that in doing that, I was unconsciously telling myself that I wasn't worth it. My opinion wasn't worth it, my words weren't worth it. That was a real mind-blowing one for me. As I keep on saying, I will try and highlight some resources, but I would like to just take a moment to direct you to the MIND website, the mental health organisation, and also in Scotland we have the Scottish Association for Mental Health. They have some fantastic resources and links on there, so don't be afraid to go and take a little look around there. Ultimately, I think we have to accept that there's something in the way we as human beings have dichotomized and dissected and judged everything as a way to make sense of life and the world, which just fundamentally doesn't serve us anymore in this arena. We can start to change it by healing ourselves, talking kindly to ourselves and others, and owning our own stories, both the light and the shadow parts, for ourselves to tell without fear and without shame. Hopefully, if we start to do it as individuals, little by little, it will feed into a greater shift in culture and attitudes. I want to end this evening with a little passage from The Silent Scream that I wrote, and it's from a piece called In the Wake of the Walking Wounded.